now we're back and we're off into the science segment.
Science.
With Barbara Brabetz.
Yes, Barbara's guest is Donald Blaise Lloyd, and Donald is the author of The Smart Guide to Geothermal Systems.
Wow.
That's something I want to learn about.
Let's watch.
Okay, let's watch.
Thanks, guys. Well, it's time for another science segment here on Impact and what impact science can make. And today, my guest is critically acclaimed author of the book Smart Guide to Geothermal, Don Lloyd. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Barbara. Enjoy being here.
Great. So you've produced a book. This is not your first book, but it's your first science-y book, if you will. But it's not aimed at science geeks like me. It's aimed at a general consumer. How did you come to get to the point where you wrote a book about geothermal energy?
You know, it was an experience I had that was very upsetting that really got me in to write this book, in that we needed, in order to have, we decided that we were going to have a geothermal heat pump in our new home because our previous home was a schoolhouse that we'd renovated that required 3,000 gallons of oil a year, and we just had to sell it. It was just too much for us. And so the centerpiece of our new home was going to be a geothermal heat pump. We needed a construction loan to do that. We were finally called into the bank to say, all right, you're approved, we have approved your loan. Great. But there's one little problem. You cannot have your geothermal heat pump.
Too newfangled for the bank.
The bank. This was like a blow to the head. So what I did, I had to write a letter to the bank, copying everyone that I could think of. I had to write it about 4 times to get the anger out of my voice. And I told them what a heat pump was, that I would probably save $2,000 to $3,000 a year, which would make it easier to pay my mortgage. That the value of the home would probably be $40,000 to $50,000 greater just because of that. And besides, why would they want to go against the national policy of being less dependent on foreign oil?
Sure.
And using renewable energy.
So let's take a step back. You've built your home. You've had this home now for 4 years.
Yes.
And you're saving about how much money do you estimate every year?
Every year it's about $2,500 a year.
Wow.
Because I do not require oil.
So $2.5 grand tax-free essential money that you're not having to put out because you put a geothermal system in your house.
That's correct.
Now, how hard is it to put in a geothermal system? And really, can you do that? I know you had a new house built, but can be put in old construction as well. Say you had stayed at your old home with the oil burner and decided to switch to geothermal. Are all these things possible?
All are possible, and it's being done every day.
That's great. So let's take a step back and talk about how geothermal energy works as a means of heating or cooling a house, whether it's existing or new construction.
All right, the big difference is that we're not burning anything. There is no combustion, and therefore we don't need any chimney even. I didn't have to put a chimney in our new home.
That's a few grand saved
no
right
pollution.
there. Right.
We can, the first thing we need to do is realize that we're getting free heat from the ground. To get that, we need to have some way of putting in pipes under the ground, perhaps in trenches, perhaps in vertical pipes. But we put cold water through those pipes with antifreeze and absorb the heat from the ground, maybe below the frost line, 6 feet perhaps.
So in this area, if we go below the frost line, 6 or 7 feet down, what's the normal temp thereabouts of ground? I mean, we've all been in a cave probably at one point or another on those school field trips.
In this area, it's about 50 degrees. In Florida, it's about 70 degrees. It varies throughout the United States.
Well, 50 degrees is not warm enough for me in my house, although, you know, I think my husband would just say put a hat on. But we could use that for both cooling and heating. How do we take energy that's at 50 degrees and make it comfortable for you or me to be able to get out of the shower in the morning?
50 degrees feels cold if you put your hand in it because your skin is at 98.6 degrees. But if you put 28 degrees water through the ground, it will pick up heat energy. Heat always flows spontaneously from the warmer to the cooler object.
So you put in some kind of water that's colder than the ground. The water goes from the ground into that loop, and then that loop goes to your house. Then the technology really starts.
Then that water flows through some concentric pipes, pipes within pipes, transfers its heat energy into another loop called the refrigerant loop, which is really refrigerant technology. And this particular material is easily changes from a liquid to a gas, and that's where it absorbs all the energy. And it stores it until it can be released later in the process.
So if we think of like a refrigerator, which makes it cold on the inside, if you put your hand on the bottom of the refrigerator, you feel the hot that's being pulled out of the refrigerator pumping out, and that's essentially the heat that refrigerating loop is grabbing from the water. It's taking that heat and it's using that heat then to heat your house.
We're taking the heat from the ground, transferring it through a process into the house. That's right.
And then this
the
heat
final
pump,
loop
right, the last loop,
would be an air loop if it's an air type system, where the cold air from the house passes over warm pipes, becomes warm, heats the house.
just like in a regular furnace, but it's
that
called a
whole
heat pump.
process can be reversed in order to get cooling.
So
we get very comfortable heating, very comfortable cooling.
So we could get heating and air conditioning, and this will work best with a house that already has forced hot air, because the ducting would already be in the house, for example.
That's absolutely true. In fact, that's the only way you really can get air conditioning. Keep in mind that this geothermal heat pump is reversible with just the push of a button. I've had some cases where you had heat in the morning, cooling in the afternoon, same day.
Great. No going and fiddling with many switches. It's just the
And
technology
no
is there.
device to have to transfer heat like an air conditioner has to do.
Well, you live in the Hudson Valley and have land, and so you think you need to put in this big loop system to grab heat from the ground. Can you do it if you live on a small plot in suburbia, for example?
Actually, in my particular case, I use my well as my heat source, so I didn't need the ground disruption. That is actually a less expensive way to do it because I already had my pipes going out to my well. So we draw heat from our water from our well and then pump it right back into that well again.
Right, so you're not tainting it when you're looping it. You're just grabbing heat. Heat is heat.
And it's separated into two parts, part for domestic use and part for the heat pump.
So
and it works.
So it's more expensive to put in one of these systems because it's relatively new. I mean, I won't say brand new technology. It's been around for about 30 years. But what is essentially the cost for a typical family home, say new construction, to put one in?
The cost depends on the type of ground loop that's needed there.
The outside stuff.
Right. My house, the total cost ran around $25,000. And that included the ductwork.
Everything.
Had to go in there.
The heat pump.
Which you would need in any case. In most people's homes, the difference is going to be the price of that ground loop. But the price of that ground loop is expensive. It could be $10,000. It could be higher. But the federal tax credit almost always covers that.
And right now, the feds will give you 30% of the cost of a geothermal system back as part of a tax incentive to get off of foreign oil, for example.
That's correct.
30%. That's terrific. That makes it competitive with other more conventional fossil fuel systems.
You have to assume that you're going to have some kind of a heating system anyway.
Right.
So the extra cost is in the ground loop, and that's covered by the tax credits. And some states give even more.
Well, Don, you have a website that goes along with the book, and I can't say enough about the book, The Smart Guide to Geothermal.
I do.
Your website is?
My website is the smartguidetogeothermal.com.
It's a very smart website. And you wanted to say a word about the book and the process that got you here.
Yes, I would like to thank my publisher. Very professional, very smart. We had quite a time, many months of challenging my assumptions, finding some of my errors, finding that some things I was right. We all learned as we went through this process, and very happy with the result.
So Pixie Jack Press.
Pixie Jack Press, and they have a website, pixiejackpress.com.
Another smart website. Well, Don, I learned a lot when reading your book, and it's very easy to read, very easy to understand, great diagrams, some of which you've seen today. Don, Lloyd, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Barbara.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure being here.
Back to you guys.